Right, we're going to kick off. Hello, everyone. It's so strange knowing there's so many of you joining this webinar and not actually being able to see you, but I trust that you're there. We've had an incredible reaction to this webinar. We've had 300 signups, so hopefully everyone has arrived on time. Thank you for joining us and welcome to our webinar on esports, how to play the game. Today, you'll mostly be hearing from our guest speakers who represent different parts of the esports industry. And they're going to talk about the opportunities for brands in esports and how to play an authentic and credible role in the space. There will be some time at the end for a Q&A. So if you do have any questions throughout, please use the Q&A function and we'll try and make sure we cover your questions at the end of the session. Okay. So just to kick off, I wanted to start by introducing myself and also to talk a little bit about M&C Saatchi Sport and Entertainment, who we are and what we do. I'm going to set the scene on the esports landscape very briefly before handing over to our guest speakers. So I'm Jodie Fulliger. I'm Joint Managing Director of M&C Saatchi Sport and Entertainment London. And we are global specialists in passion point marketing. So we connect brands to consumers through their passions to deliver meaningful change at a brand level, commercial level, and in the best instances for society as a whole. And we've been doing what we do for over 16 years. And in that time, we've been lucky enough to work with some of the best brands in the world, such as Coke, Heineken, Reebok, Ballantine's, and Adidas, helping them to build association and credibility in people's passions through partnerships with existing passion properties, such as the likes of the Olympics or BAFTAs, Glastonbury, or League of Legends, or by creating new brand-owned passion platforms, such as the likes of Ballantine's, True Music, and O2 Wear the Rose. So what do we mean when we talk about passions? Well, what were once considered interests and hobbies, we now define as passions. Through the proliferation of digital channels, content, communities, and direct-to-fan engagement, we now have the opportunity to engage with our passions more frequently, more directly, and more personally than ever before. Therefore, passions now play a much bigger role in our everyday lives. They define who we are and often how we talk about ourselves. Our passion expertise spans sports, entertainment, and lifestyle, and covers the myriad of sub-passions within those big macro sectors. But we don't operate in passion silos because, well, fans don't. No one is defined by only one passion. Our passions are multiple and interconnected. Having said that, today we are going to zero in on a hugely exciting and rapidly growing passion area within the gaming space, esports. So I am going to presume that most people joining the call know what esports is, but if not, that's absolutely fine. We wanted to kind of get everyone on the same page before we start with a simple definition, which we found very useful in the past when describing and introducing esports to clients. So put very simply, esports is competitive video gaming in an organized format. It really is no more complicated than that. If it's gaming in a competition format, then it's esports. But today is not about explaining esports, and it's certainly not about explaining the scale of esports. You won't be hearing phrases such as tipping point or a burgeoning industry, because esports is a very clearly established space and regulated passion area with huge audiences and sophisticated ecosystems. So what we're going to talk about today is actually how brands can unlock the power of esports to reach highly engaged local and global audiences by unpacking the various ways in for brands. However, having said all that, we thought it would be amiss for us not to provide some of the up-to-date figures on the space, especially given its acceleration during COVID. Gaming was one of the very few passion areas that experienced a surge in audience and engagement levels in the past 10 months. Much like TV, gaming has provided escapism, distraction, and stimulation. But unlike TV, gaming also provides something far more vital during this time of isolation: community and connection through shared interactive and communal experiences. And whilst all other tournaments have been put on hold, esports tournaments have continued virtually, because they can. Esports is a digital first passion that can be experienced in real life, but ultimately lives virtually, which makes it very COVID proof. So looking at the latest statistics, it shows that the global audience for esports is now at a whopping 495 million. And of that audience, that total population, 45% tune in more than once a month. And there has also been a 12% growth, as I referenced in the previous slide, in the past year during COVID. But that growth is predicted to treble by 2023 at a rate of 30%. And in response to the industry becoming more proactively inclusive, the percentage of female esports fans is growing. Currently at 35%, it's going to go up. It went up by 7% last year. And for those that think esports is only watched and played by teenagers, think again. 50% of the total fan base sit at that bullseye, hard to reach Gen Z millennial target of 21 to 35-year-olds. In fact, there are as many 35 to 50-year-olds as fans as there are 10 to 20-year-olds. So when we refer to the esports landscape, this is essentially what we mean. So there are many different components to the esports ecosystem, and unfortunately we don't have time to cover the entire ecosystem today. So what we've done is focused on 4 areas that we think present the biggest opportunities for brands. And these are going to be covered by our 4 speakers. So James Dean will speak about ESL as the world's largest leagues and tournaments operator. Roman Bigar will speak about Riot in the context of being the publisher of the biggest esports game in the world. Anna Baumann will be speaking about Rekt Global's winning teams and players. And Johnny Maddell will speak from a legal perspective about how brands can safely build sponsorships and partnerships in this space. So now I'm going to hand over to them. I've already taken up far too much airtime, and I'm going to introduce James Dean, who has a great name. His parents are very kind to him.
I can't live up to it, unfortunately, but thank you very much for the introduction. And it's it genuinely is a huge pleasure to be presenting to the group. Obviously, our relationship with M&C Saatchi has been a long one. And we're really excited to share some of the latest developments from our side. So just to touch on ESL first, I really want to set the mood. So I'm going to share a very short video. It's only a minute long. And you know what I've done? I've not shared correctly, so I'm going to do that again. 2 seconds. Sorry, I've already ruined it for you, and we practiced and rehearsed it so perfectly.
James, shall I just introduce you properly before you start?
Yeah, please do.
While you're doing that, I'll buy you some time. So James is the founder and CEO of the ESL UK subsidiary, building the ESL brand and community on a regional level. ESL is the world's largest esports company with 15 offices across the globe. And the UK office has maintained 50% year-on-year growth since its foundation. It operates the UK's longest running national esports tournament, the ESL Premiership, currently spanning 4 different gaming titles. To this day, ESL still holds the record for the largest ever online audience for a UK esports tournament. Over to you, James.
Thanks. Right, back to the video. So hopefully you'll hear it this time.
We've come far, experienced so much, been to so many places with so many people, with one destination in mind: to create a world where everybody can be somebody. A sport where every fan has a voice. A movement where anyone can come in. People came from all over the world to be a part of it, to prove that, if you want it enough, anything's possible. There's a hero hidden in all of us, waiting to leap out of our bedrooms and onto the world stage.
So when all of us here grow older and our children grow older, we'll tell them about how it all began.
A generation came together Friends turned into leaders. Superstars stepped out of the shadows and inspired a whole sport to do the same.
You are the people who found esports, drove esports, and believed in it.
What happens next? Well, that depends on how we write it.
So as Jodie said, I'm the founder and MD of ESL UK, a very substantial part of the esports ecosystem and ESL itself. And we also have a sister brand called DreamHack. And in September last year, we actually merged together. And being founded in 2000 and 1994, respectively, we really do encapsulate a huge proponent of that entire ecosystem. And actually today we represent over 25% of all esports content globally. So it's pretty substantial, and we've had an amazing journey along the way. But to Jodie's point earlier, really it's about a passion, and it's a multiple passion that surrounds gaming as a whole. We have a huge amount of activity that sees people come together in friendships to play games competitively on a casual basis. You can see top left there, a big LAN party at a DreamHack festival where people will bring their computers together and play, but also socialize. There's music going on and all sorts of different experiences. There's the fandom, the fact that we can get together, and whether we're online or in a big stadium with 30,000 fans, we can really share amazing moments and see our favorite teams and players win big prize pools, but also small ones too. And they create real memories. And I think if we think about all the stories along on this journey, the memories are the ones that really stick. And there's a real heritage now after many years of esports running, of incredible moments that we will still talk about 20 years on. And there's the talent, the players. It's giving or providing a grand stage as ESL and DreamHack to those teams to pick up that trophy and take home millions of dollars. But this centers around gaming. Gaming is an entertainment platform, but because it's competitive and because it's so inclusive, there's so many different ways in which we can interact. And ultimately that means we can create our own stories in this passion point, whether we're dressing up as cosplay or getting involved in other creative activities or just a member of a forum or a social group. It's amazing to see the millions and millions of strains and ways in which we interact. So the way we take things forward is we have in effect 3 pillars of activity. We start with our ESL Play platform, which is really the first opportunity for those gamers to have their first foray into competitive esports. So they can join either as an individual or maybe find a few friends to join, to create a team. But they'll be able to climb some ladders. Maybe it's the first time they actually win some prize money or a prize of some sort. But ultimately, it's for fun. As you climb those ladders as a player, you'll get spotted. There's talent scouts all out there, and a pro or amateur team will contact you and ask you to join their team. And this is where the foundation of our national leagues really fit in. It's very important as a tournament operator that we have a foundation and that local approach in order to encourage talent all over the world in order to improve their skills and find an opportunity in esports on a more professional basis. And then of course, there's our big stadium events. We have tens and tens a year, obviously not so many during COVID, but they're all still operating online currently. And these are different circuits around different games all over the world, attracting the best of that playing ability. So I'd like to just touch on the Premiership and what that really means. So this is our UK and Ireland National League. It started in 2014. And I want to just touch on a guy here who's holding the trophy there. This is back in 2015, a guy called Smuya. That's his gamer tag, by the way. He's not even got a team shirt at this stage, but he's a CSGO player, and he's found it to Team Epsilon. It was a fairly late notice acquisition for that team, and he played really well, and the team actually won. And only 3 years later, he's standing in Cologne on a big stage in front of 10,000 fans, with them all shouting or chanting Smuja. I think that's an incredible story for him. And it's also explains why this theme around community is so important in order to continue to encourage the entire ecosystem. And it doesn't stop there. In 2019, we had Team M&M win again the National League for Rainbow Six. And that same year, those guys got picked up by Team Navi, who are a very large international team, and they found themselves on a big international stage, winning a lot of money again in Japan. And just last year alone, we had a team in the UK called Endpoint, who had been winning the National League several years on a trot, and finally they've coined a qualifier slot into the Pro League, which is a very big deal. So you'll see these guys on an international stage this year. And this really reflects in the numbers too. So this is just 1 out of 2 seasons just for CSGO. We have multiple games within our National League in the UK, but it's still seeing almost 1 million unique viewers across that season, which is important because it shows that there's a relevance to the community and the fact that everyone is interested in following those stories. And obviously, it's a great way in which a brand can get involved. Now I want to touch on a case study around DHL. DHL isn't the first brand that probably jumps out to you as the perfect brand to fit into esports, being a logistics firm. But after all, they are very involved in sports. So the way we approach it is like many other marketing campaigns or storytelling and passions, but we try and find a way in which we can obviously find product placement or the native integration of that product or service. We look at providing some value to the fan base around content assets, but also it's important to try and discover what DHL's story is in all of this. So naturally speaking, we created the boring kind of B2B advert showing DHL vans delivering stuff for us at events, etc. We couldn't do it without them, etc. But really that's ticking a box. But it starts getting interesting when we start thinking about the actual content delivery. So how do we create significant value for the fan? And we created something called Moments That Deliver, which is a content series that run pre, post, and during the event, which would deliver kind of little stories around the periphery of the tournament that, quite frankly, wouldn't exist if it wasn't for DHL to being involved. And that's very clear in the branding and the way we delivered. The fans absolutely love that because it's extra bits of content that they really, really love. It's also very important to really customize things. There's no point in just putting out a generic advert around, to promote a service or a product if it's not tailored for the audience. We made this mistake once with Mercedes running a campaign called Grow Up, which is just entirely the wrong thing to tell an esports audience. And as soon as we customize it, it became very relevant. DHL here are basically saying, hey, we support all these different sports and we recognize esports as one of them. A very, very important message. Then we started to think about what we could do to tell a DHL story. And the first thing we came up with was to create loot boxes. Everyone loves a present. And Sir Action Slacks on the left there, he's a very predominant personality in the Dota 2 scene, which DHL support. And he basically acted as a DHL courier and delivered these parcels to the talent and the players arriving at the tournament. This obviously creates a lot of social media activity and a great story around unboxing and all the different aspects of opening. And we created this lovely poem basically talking about the story of arriving at the event and how important it was to get these parcels delivered. And it's full of memes and in-jokes around the Dota 2 community. So it's very well received again by the community. It's basically an advert, but one that pretty much every Dota 2 fan has now seen. And that continued, and something magical happened. Dota 2, which is a game made by a publisher and game developer called Valve, actually integrated the DHL Effibot into the game. This is an unprecedented scenario. This does not happen very often, and it usually has to be carefully curated, not to spoil or change the game in any effect.
Hello there, my name is Sir Action Slacks, and I've been promoted to be the floor manager of the grand Dota 2 interdimensional facility here at Hamburg. Gotta tell you, I love my job. Yeah, the line here runs about 6,000 real-world packages per hour. When we move to the digital realm, I'd say we run about 18 billion an hour in Dota 2. That number is about 10 times now, thanks to OpenAI. Thanks a lot, Elon. Healing salves, cheap, efficient healing. Good players get them all the time. Bad players get about 10 times as much as anybody else. There's a lot of bad players. At DHL Sorting Center, we pride ourselves on getting your order from the shop right. But the real heroes, those are the couriers. Not these guys, of course. It's 2018. We've automated that. No more donkeys. Now we use the Effibot. Effibot's one of our most loyal employees. She's been through 100 low pro games, never died. But that's what we do over here. Try to bring the DHL standards into the Dota universe. Dependable, reliable, we get you your stuff. Here we go. I want you to be safe out there. It's dangerous, all right? Bye, Effie. Bye. You'll be fine.
And it had a big impression. This is a very short clip in ESL 1 Birmingham in 2018. Every moment a DHL logo appeared or some sort of content would come about with that was being presented by DHL. The crowd took it upon themselves to actually chant DHL. This is another example at the same event.
Intel, Mercedes-Benz, Vodafone, Alienware, DHL.
It was received extremely well. That value really came across, and DHL's own esports story came across extremely well too. And social media obviously blew up, not just content created by ourselves or DHL, but the community themselves and the talent and the players all involved, really enjoying the contribution that DHL had brought to the tournament. It's a partnership that continues on to today, and we continue to innovate around that delivery. And the numbers speak for themselves. We reached almost 50 million uniques just in that 1 year. Absolutely incredible delivery, incredible team effort, and obviously a pleasure to working with the brand. Thanks very much. I know there's some questions later, so I'll leave it at that and hand back to Jodie. Thank you.
Thank you, James. I absolutely love that DHL case study. And I mean, it's pretty unique, I know, but it just shows when you understand the audience and what makes them tick, you can create a really seamless integration, which has an incredible effect. And now DHL is very much part of the Dota 2 community, which is the ultimate example. So thank you, James, for that. Moving on, we now have Romain Bigat joining us. So Romain has spent the last 7 years working on the competitive gaming global circuit. He started on the brand side as esports manager for Razer Europe before joining pro teams in Europe, where he was team manager of Unicorns of Love in North America and team director for Optic Gaming. He now works in the business development division of Riot Games based in Berlin, leading the monetization of the League of Legends European Championship. Over to you, Romain.
Yes, I can unmute myself. I'm not sure about the video. Hi, everyone, and really nice to meet you. Can you hear me? Does that work? Technology.
Yes, we
my
can.
friend. Perfect. All right. And start the video. Here we go. Sweet. Hello, hello. So thanks for the intro. My name is Romain. I work for Games in the business development department. I'm super excited to walk you a bit through the League of Legends ecosystem and how we do business. Let's dive into it. So League of Legends is a game made by Riot Games. What you can see in the background is the entrance of our office in Los Angeles. On the side, you can see little pictures made by our fans. I miss this place from the time we could travel all across the world soon. You have heard of League of Legends, I hope, if you are a bit interested into into esport. This was our first and only game up to a year and a half ago. And these games became more than a game. This is the current first esport title, and it is big all across the world with 300 million players downloaded the game, 8 million concurrent all across the world, 30 million people following us on our digital platform, so big social media reach, 350 million regarding our music video, because we do some music video connected to the game, and more than 1 billion hours watched on Twitch. Our world of League of Legends is expanding. So we launched a few new games last year. The first batch was connected to the IP we created around League. Legends of Runeterra is a card game. Teamfight Tactics is a battle arena game. We are also expanding into new platforms. League of Legends Wild Rift is a mobile version of the game. And we are also launching new universe like Valorant, which is a shooter FPS. So we are finally putting the S in Riot Games. And so far, it's been a really interesting ride. Much more than a game, we are doing music connected to the game because our fan wants this kind of interaction. We work with top-level artists to create specific video show and specific tracks, which we use during our live event, for example. We created stars and a lot of influencers because the game is paid so much. Of course, if you're really good at the game, people want to watch you play. On the picture, you can see Martin Reckless, which is a European player, extremely successful. We are developing more and more stories around the game. So we had a partnership with Marvel. We still have it actually to push some comics around some of the champions we use in game. We are about to launch an animated series called Arcane, which is I think this year. So we are really expanding our universe. It's a bit the reverse idea of the Disney universe, which is going to add more and more IP into the Disneyverse, where we center everything around one game, but we keep adding more and more stuff into it, so our fans can really enjoy one universe under a different lens. And of course, sports, which is the reason I'm here in front of you today, to talk sports and esports. League of Legends is a really big esport title. On the left, you can see a top tier of the actual esport title across the world. That's the 2020 list. The 2019 list was a bit different. Some games go up, some games go down, some games go in, some games go out, depending on how many people are watching it, depending on the business amount of stuff you can do on the title. League has been tier 1 for ages. And on the right, you can see the total hours watched on Twitch for 2020. A lot of people watch the game, a lot of people play the game. And if you dive a bit deeper into esport, actually, this is our pyramid. So I like pyramids, they usually mean a lot. So this is a whole global ecosystem. We started by creating the World Championship, which is a bit unusual because in traditional sports, usually if your sport is going well, you start by having a tournament in your city, then in your region, then in your country. Then if the sport starts to catch up a lot, then you can have really big international tournaments. We did it the other way around. We started with the World Championship. We realized it works well, so we started to dive a bit deeper in some region. And then we realized, okay, there is definitely a big market and a big appetite from people to play the game and to compete around it. So we even created layers below the international level. So, and you have those layers in different regions across the globe. So this is the European level, for example, but like China, Korea, and the US would have something different. What's really interesting is we see esport as a retention tool, not really an acquisition tool. The goal of League of Legends esport is not to convince my mom that she needs to start playing League of Legends. The goal of esport is to convince my little brother, which is an active League of Legends player, that he needs to keep playing because you have this whole esport and competitive ecosystem available for him. And what's also interesting is this pyramid, you can see it in a lot of sports. You can see it in football, for example. But in football, you would have a little layer at the bottom, which is people watching football. And then you have competitive, and then you have the super competitive. You would have the World Cup with the top players. In esports League of Legends, we have more people playing than people watching. So you would have to reverse the pyramid and put the people watching on the other side. And it's a fascinating challenge for us because it means our biggest growth opportunity right now is actually on our own players. We don't have to leave our ecosystem. We have more than enough on our plate just working in our own existing player base, which is, I believe, really cool. To realize how big the inspiration level, which is our top level, is where we are in Europe right now. The next slide, I love it. Those are all the biggest league. The 4 current biggest league across the globe are Europe, America, China, and Korea. And if you dive a bit deeper in all those leagues, this is each logo here is a club made of 5 to 10 to 15 pro players with a coach, manager, sports psychologist, lawyer, a therapist, cook, like everything to make sure those top clubs can exist and survive and be competitive. Europe is there. You might know some of those logos. And right after me, Anna from Rogue is talking to you, for example. Let's dive a bit more into Europe, which is the department I'm working for. So the LEC, League of Legends European Championship, where we have the top 10 best teams in Europe. We play from January to August, where the season is made of 2 big splits. You have a champion at the end of each split, and the top champion can go to the World Championship in October, November. Each season is 8 weeks, and it's 8 weeks of regular season where everyone plays everyone. Then you have 2 weeks of playoff. Then you have a finals where usually we take the show outside of Berlin, where we record all this part, and we go to different host city. Of course, due to COVID, it was a bit complicated to travel across Europe. But the last show we had, which were in, oh God, 2019 already. Were Rotterdam and Athens, and they were really cool. What makes us special in Europe? We have clearly identified values, which we try to develop even further when we work with brands. The first one is creativity. I think we're doing a decent job at blurring the line between an ad and content creation. Content creation being really, really important in esport, and you saw it before with DHL. It's crucial because we know how to talk to our fans, but we need to create the right bridge between a brand coming to us to talk to our fan and between our fan and the brand wanting to talk with them. And I think we did a really, really good job at the LEC marketing our talents. So the people you see in the background are not players. They are people working on the show all the time. So it doesn't matter who wins or who loses. Those guys are going to be there. They talk about the games, they analyze the games, they have casters decks and everything. So multicultural, so that's the same people coming from everywhere across Europe, from South Africa, from the US. We are also a really competitive region. We won the mid-season tournament in 2019. We are extremely proud of it because that's the first time neither China or Korea won it. And we have high hopes to be able to do something as the World Championship this year, where once again China and Korea have been consistently winning for the last 8 years. Yeah, something like that. How does our broadcast look? So as I was saying, we are live every week. We are live every Friday and Saturday. The whole show is about 6 hours. So it's not like in football where most of the games will be played at the same time, and the super important ones will be played like on Sunday evening, for example. We play every game one after the other, and the show always looks the same. So it's first hour of countdown, then we have a little pre-show to explain to everyone what's going to happen. Then you have the same cycle of analysis of the game, pick and ban, which is an in-game stuff, the game itself, and then a break with ads and branding and some specific segment. This happened 5 times because we have 10 teams. You can see they're standing there, so they all face one another twice a week, and then you have a post-show. So this is the broadcast. How do you watch us? So a little specificity of Europe, as you all know, is we don't all speak English, as you can hear with my French accent. And if you dive a bit deeper in France, for example, they don't really speak English. So if you want to be really, truly pan-European, you need to exist in more than just English, which is why we are working with local companies a bit everywhere across Europe. And we are actually adding even more and more languages to make sure we have the maximum European penetration. From a viewership perspective, things are going well. Every year we keep climbing, and 2021 stays the same. As I was telling you, the season is made of a regular season, which is now 8 weeks and not 9. So classic viewership, and then only the best teams go to playoff, and the last week is final. The difference between this yellow pick and this yellow pick is the amount of games they play in the final. Usually finals, you need to play a total of 5 games. The first team winning 3 wins. If it's 3-0, like here, of course, the viewership doesn't go that high. If it's an intense 3-2 with a lot of fights and blood and everything, of course, the viewership is going to keep building, and that's where you end up with almost 500,000 as peak. We have a deep penetration with the millennials, so the 16-29. Because we keep getting bigger and bigger, we were trying to understand how big are we if you start comparing us to traditional sports. And one of the first steps to realize is we are so much younger. We are much younger, and our growth from a young people perspective keeps getting higher. So this is good. I'm a bit sad COVID happened because it makes it complicated to compare us to tennis, basket, and so on, because they could not have live event. I think COVID was handled pretty well by the esports world because it was easy for us to go into digital. Of course, we are missing the live event and the big stadiums and stuff, but it's still better than football for now. So I guess we're lucky. What can we sell to brand? So it took us a bit of time from a Riot perspective to acknowledge that it can only help us to start working more and deeper with brands. So that's a growth big overview of what we have available. Of course, IP right for the tournament, which is nice, to specific products. We control and create the whole broadcast, which makes it really easy for brand integration. We have direct access to our talent, like when that's the moment where we start blurring the line between ads and content. From a social media perspective, we are big. We know what we're doing. I think we're funny half the time. We're cringe the other half, but that's what the audience likes so far. Offline activation event, we love those, but that's for a world without COVID. And we have access because we are the publisher. We create the whole esport, but we also work on the game. So it allows us to create a lot of stuff with digital items and things like that. We compiled all those different assets into different packages, which we are actively selling to a maximum of 1, 4, 8, and 4. So the traditional normal approach is the official supplier. To be fair, no one signed. I mean, usually I have the prices here, but I'm more than happy to disclose them if you are interested. No one signed at the price which is there because we have a limited amount of slot, and we want every partner coming in to matter and to create some specific tailored activation. And yeah, so if you are really interested, if things work well, you can evolve to a main partner. We are still looking for a presenting partner, but this one is a bit difficult because from a brand perspective, you already need to be super esport educated. So you can really do the best from the partnership. A classic approach is the final partner approach, where instead of covering half a year or a full year or a couple of years, you will just cover the playoff, and so the really important moment of the game, of the season, sorry, and then you can see if you like it or not. We have a few big brands which started as the final partners and now are main partners because we had a really good back and forth, and they were happy with the activation. If you are really looking to a specific country, we also have national partners where you can discuss with some of the company we are working for, and you brand really, really locally with local influencers. A few of the brands who worked with us, Beko, Kia, Foot Locker, Red Bull, Logitech, Pringles, KitKat, all of those have a different story. All of those had a different reason to come into esports. I think the KitKat activation is a really funny one, actually, because they are branding poses, which is a really sad moment from an esport perspective when you have to do a pose, because it means you have a technical problem somewhere. So usually everyone is freaking out backstage, but from a KitKat perspective, they wanted to be associated with those pause moment and chill, things are going to be okay. So that was a really, really good fit. But yeah, those are just examples of activation. And I am done. I hope I was on time. Questions will be later.
Thank you so much, Romain. That was
Welcome.
brilliant whistle stop tour of Riot. It always blows my mind a bit when you look at the scale of League of Legends universe that you've created. And I love the inverted pyramid as well. It's something I've always really loved about esports, is how democratic it is. You know, how with enough practice and the right commitment, anyone could be a really good professional esports player. And just showing that there's more players than viewers, I think really kind of speaks to that. So thank you, Romain. So now we're going to move on to Anna as our next speaker, who is Anna Baumann is the Executive Vice President of Esports at RECT Global, and she oversees all of its esports properties, including Rogue and London Royal Ravens teams. While she remains Managing Director and General Counsel of the European subsidiary, she now focuses on a streamlined implementation of the unique vision of RECT Global's ownership group to build a global brand connecting music icons, esports superstars, and community outreach across all esports properties. Before leading esports properties to success, Anna's esports roots actually lie in the legal sector, where she focused her time as an attorney for many years on professionalizing esports, establishing best practices with regards to player welfare, integrity issues, and grassroots efforts. So over to you, Anna.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me and giving me the opportunity to talk about our esports team. Rogue, we really want to give you the angle of that part of the esports ecosystem as well. I think also Romain just gave a beautiful introduction to one of the ecosystems we're actually competing in. So I'm going to dive right in, but before I'm going to go to our esports brand Rogue, I'd like to talk about our wider company approach that was already explained a little bit. So our parent company, and that's a bit unique when you're looking at esports teams. Our parent company is a really large esports agency that takes a 360-degree approach. And we are working with many clients, bringing them into the esports space. You can see them on the right side. It's very US focused for the moment with Tencent, NASCAR, HyperX. And then on top of it, we also have an influencer vertical as well as an esports vertical, which then works around our two IP properties, the London Royal Ravens and Rogue. So again, before we talk a bit more about Rogue and the Ravens, I'd also like to give a bit of an overview of who are the influencers we're working with. We're using them quite a bit when we're also doing our activations, our campaigns on the esports side. Here you see the Talent X influencers that are under contract with us. These are really the top 1% on TikTok. The Sway Brothers might come to mind. These guys have an incredible following. You can fantastically create campaigns around them. And then, of course, the unique angle about us at Rogue and RECT Global is our investor structure. Here you can see lots of musical talent who are not only investors, but really assets we can work together with when we are creating digital campaigns. I think the most important, some of which I will reference later, in a campaign we've been doing with Kia, Imagine Dragons, Steve Aoki, and then Nicky Romero on DJs, bands that are also already connected to the esports space. All right. And then, of course, you'll see other influencers here. For example, Big Star, huge YouTuber, has just joined our Royal Ravens as investor, as well as the face of this franchise. All right, so diving a little bit further into our esports teams, you can see here what, on the one hand, Rogue is a brand that has currently 5 competitive teams in multiple games. Our tentpole is the League of Legends team. As I said in the ecosystem, Omar just explained, we're doing quite well. You see our team in the middle. We qualified for the World Championship last year. Currently, we're in the #1 slot of the LEC, the league we compete in. So I would say we're doing pretty well. On the right side, you can see our Call of Duty guys, and just, to touch briefly upon that. So the Call of Duty ecosystem is built in a way that the publisher actually gives licenses to teams participating in the franchise, that not only grants the right to compete in the league that is broadcasted very much like the LEC, but we as teams also have the exclusive marketing rights for a territory. And in this case, we do have the exclusive marketing rights for the UK, which is of course super exciting. And that means that not only do we participate under the name London Royal Ravens in the league, but we're also planning to have a big facility in London. We're currently planning out a beautiful series of activations across the UK to really engage the fans and Call of Duty players across the entire island. All right, so zooming into Rogue and what we have done in 2020 and what we're all about. So one focus of our brand is really high performance. This is where we heavily invest. And I think this is where we're very different from other teams. We have, Romain briefly talked about that. We have 10 support staff only for League of Legends. And this includes, of course, coaches, analysts, a cook, performance coaching. And all of that really leads to competitive success, as you can see here when we went to Worlds last year. A second layer that's really important to us is really to entertain our fans, to work on these creative campaigns together with our musical talent. You can see here in the middle that we worked with Kia last year to create this massive digital campaign, 15 content pieces, several ads utilizing our musical assets. And then, of course, it's always very amazing to see your brand across the globe. When we qualified for Worlds, our brand and our partners were all over Shanghai, where actually the World Championship took place. And as a third pillar of what's very special about our brand is that we have created a very inclusive community around Rogue. It's very important to us that we not only talk about values and stand for values even in the digital space, but that we're also building programs in the digital space that support really youth development, especially with a focus on female players. So there's more to come later this year. I can't share yet, but we're really excited about that one. Then, of course, developing a high performance framework that's not only in connection to our League of Legends team, but really overall with regards to all our teams, where we take a deep scientific dive into what gives you this 1 additional % to really outsmart your opponents. And then, as I said, we do this amazing content and create digital campaigns for our partners. Now, you might ask yourself, okay, so if, I maybe want to do something with a team, what differentiates a team from a tournament organizer such as ESL or a league such as the LEC? Well, on the one hand, our inventory is quite a bit different. So I think it's more in a traditional sense, when you compare it to traditional sports, you can activate on the jersey, very much like you see here on the picture, like Kia did at Worlds 2020. Then, of course, we can activate at live events. We have team facilities for now. We have one in Charlotte in the US, one in London, and one in Berlin. And then, of course, we're this partner to create dedicated content and develop digital campaigns. And I might say, in connection to especially the digital campaigns, I think it's very interesting, again, to look at Rec Global and how we've integrated a couple of other companies in our structure over the course of past year, for example, a media buying arm, so we can really fully service you should you consider working with us. So now, to already conclude, I'd like to look at what we did together with Kia last year and what we, seem to be very close to continuing this year as well. So when Kia approached us, and they were already quite a bit educated in the space, working with the LEC before, thanks Romain. And what they really wanted to do is utilize our musical assets to the full extent. And they especially wanted to utilize the song Warriors by Imagine Dragons, just because it's this iconic song that was performed at a World Championship. But then we also wanted to integrate Steve Aoki and Nicky Romero, and we really did these amazing integrations where, for example, Steve Aoki did a dedicated set as a pre-show for the LEC finals. It was wildly successful. It was full of memes, but full of great music as well. So really everybody enjoyed it, and especially esports fans created a lot of fuzz around it on socials too. So Mr. Kia is now a meme in the esports world. So to end, I would like to show you one ad we did for Kia that also shows how creative we go, that we want to tell funny stories while integrating the product. So here we go.
Sorry, just to jump in, Anna, we can't actually hear that.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Well, if we can't hear it, then I think it's not as funny as it should be. And we might just conclude here. Obviously, happy to share individually if somebody should be interested. Let me just go a bit further. So thank you so much for listening in. Should you be interested, feel free to reach out to your partners here. And thanks for listening.
Thank you, Anna. That was a shame we couldn't hear that film. It's really good. So we'll make sure we share that around afterwards. And great to hear about how well the teams are doing. I find the Royal Ravens Call of Duty team really exciting. Specifically, I'm thinking, for brands who are much more localized to the UK, it's a really powerful team that's doing great stuff. And very exciting to hear about the initiatives to drive more female professional esports players as well. So we're going to move on to our final speaker now. Johnny Maddell is a partner in the Sports and Esports Group at Sheridan's, which is the leading media and entertainment law firm based in London. Johnny advises clients across the sports and esports industries, including athletes, teams, rights holders, leagues, brands, agencies, investors, digital and tech platforms, and brands. Johnny advises on all legal aspects of sport and esports, including commercial IP, governance and media rights, and regularly speaks at sports and esports industry events. So over to you, Johnny, as our final speaker.
Thanks very much, Jodie, for the kind introduction. The aim of my kind of 10-15 minute session is really to build on the insights that we've heard from James, Ruman, and Anna, albeit with a slightly different focus. Now, obviously, we've heard about a number of the different considerations for brands to weigh up when trying to better understand not just the esports industry, but also how a brand's narrative might fit within the esports ecosystem. And one of the key pieces within that due diligence jigsaw, I guess, is getting an understanding of what the esports industry looks like from a regulation or governance perspective. Now, in some ways, that's no different to the considerations within traditional sport or other parts of mainstream entertainment. So when it comes to brand investment, brand partnerships, clearly understanding the regulatory landscape, and in particular how key integrity issues are dealt with, is absolutely critical to assessing the commercial value and the commercial opportunity. Now, we're quite fortunate at Sheridan's and the team in the sense that we work with stakeholders who are immersed within the esports industry. So we work with teams, rights holders, brands, tournament organizers, publishers, talent. But we also have a slightly different perspective in that we work with a range of non-endemic brands, rights holders, agencies, and talent who, for the past number of years, have been migrating or entering the esports space. And I suppose in the past few weeks, when I've been giving some thought to how best to structure this particular session, I find myself writing down some of the questions that myself and the team at Sheridan's often get asked by non-endemic brands and rights holders who are looking to have a better sense of these regulatory governance integrity issues. And I thought it would be useful just to share some of those questions to help try and tee up some high-level discussion around these issues. Now, I'm conscious that we have a fairly short space of time to really get beneath the skin of these issues, but what I'm going to try and do is just give a high-level summary to help you better understand, I suppose, some of the differences to traditional sport and indeed other parts of mainstream entertainment. And I guess the starting point of this conversation around regulation and governance really has to be, how is esports regulated? And indeed, who regulates esports? And I want to start that answer by picking up on a theme that has been running through the earlier sessions today, which is esports is very much a broad umbrella term. And in some ways, it's no different to the term sport or the term Olympic sport, in the sense that beneath the umbrella of esports, we have this multitude of individual esports or esports games. And each of those have their own community, their own audience, their own culture, their own commercial landscape, and also their own way of operating and presenting tournaments, and their own way of being regulated and dealing with integrity issues. So I guess the point I'm making is the answer to the question, how is esports regulated and who regulates esports, is actually not a straightforward one. And there are many nuances based on or depending on the part of the ecosystem that we're referring to. So I think it is important to take a game by game approach when actually trying to explore these issues further. And I think to try and simplify those nuances, it's really important to focus in on the role of the publisher. And obviously we heard from Roman with his publisher hat on from Riot Games, and he spoke very eloquently about kind of the role that they play within the ecosystem. The games publisher owns and controls and creates the intellectual property in the game. So as a starting point, the publisher is the rights holder. Now, in some cases, the publisher takes on the role of the quasi-governing body that we might see in traditional sport. And Riot is actually a very good example. So Riot regulates and manages and controls the playing of its game, League of Legends. and League of Legends events. And that's from a governance perspective, a commercial perspective, and also an integrity perspective as well. And that approach is not dissimilar to what many of us are familiar with historically within traditional sport. Where it gets a little bit nuanced is the fact that not every publisher shares the approach that Riot takes. If we take a publisher like Valve, for example, obviously the developer of two huge global games, CSGO and Dota 2, Valve takes a much more hands-off approach and actually is happy to leave it to third-party promoters and event organizers to run with the regulatory aspects and the integrity aspects, whether that be betting integrity or in-game cheating or other integrity issues that we may come on to. And then there are a host of other publishers that fall somewhere between those two approaches and fall somewhere within that spectrum where we have Riot towards one end of the spectrum and Valve and others towards the other end of the spectrum. And I guess in a nutshell, that is part of the reason why the answer to the question I started off with is not necessarily straightforward, and the solution to tackling integrity issues is not necessarily straightforward either. One of the questions that we often get asked is this idea of, should there be a governing body or bodies within esports? And in many ways, for all of the reasons that we've kind of set out in the last 3 or 4 minutes, the idea of there being an overarching governing body or bodies within esports from a regulatory perspective is a bit of a misnomer because of the nature of the ecosystem and the game-by-game approach that is needed. Now, what that doesn't mean is that there cannot be some form of unified, joined up approach by the key stakeholders within the industry to dealing with these integrity issues. And the types of integrity issues that I'm talking about, will be familiar to everyone. Again, in the context of traditional sport, we're talking about in-game cheating, we're talking about betting integrity, doping, match fixing, player exploitation, and player welfare. Now, whilst there is no single central global authority to deal with these issues, what I would emphasize is the increasingly significant role being played by a body called the Esports Integrity Commission, which you may want to read into in your own time, ESIC as they're commonly known. And ESIC plays an important regulator role in that it partners with many major tournament operators in order to protect the integrity of esports competition. So it deals with cheating in esports, it deals with match manipulation and doping. And that's from a prevention perspective, an investigation perspective, and then also a prosecution perspective as well. In many ways, ESIC is designed to be the recognized guardian of the integrity of esports. Now, unsurprisingly, it has been challenging, and it is challenging to try and unite the industry and bring together all of the key stakeholders to have a unified fight against corruption. But there's no doubt that ESIC has played a hugely important role and continues to do so. And there are numerous sort of case studies and examples that, if we had a little bit more time, we could probably delve into. Just very briefly, one just to flag and bring to your attention. Last year, some of you may be aware that there was a highly documented bug abuse scandal within the world of CSGO. And effectively, this bug allowed certain team coaches to access parts of the map of the game that they normally wouldn't have been able to. And this allowed these coaches to gather information about opposing teams. Now, ESIC were appointed to investigate the matter and acted very swiftly, very decisively. And there were quite a significant number of bans then issued to coaches. And that followed in the steps of the competition organizer, ESL. We obviously heard from James earlier, who issued their own bans as well. And I think this is quite a neat case study because it shows the importance of the role of not just a tournament organizer, but of a body like ESIC. It shows the swift, decisive action taken, which is important not just to protect the integrity of, in this case, CSGO, but actually there's a wider piece to this, which is maintaining the trust of commercial partners and also maintaining the trust of the audience and the community and the fans in the industry that obviously we've talked a lot about today. So I guess from my perspective and the perspective of the team at Sheridan's, in terms of what we're seeing on an everyday basis, we are undoubtedly seeing a transformation, or we have seen a transformation in recent years as to the maturity and the sophistication and the robustness of regulatory frameworks, governance frameworks, and how key stakeholders are dealing with these issues. Again, if we had more time, we could perhaps tap into some of these sort of integrity examples. I think betting integrity is a really interesting one. And if we had more time, we could probably have a really interesting sort of panel debate on it, because I think we have to accept that betting has been a positive for the esports industry from a revenue generating and a commercial perspective, provided that it is approached and commercialized in the right way. Clearly, this needs to be balanced with the inevitable integrity risks that, of course, we've seen within traditional sport as well. But as a key underlying message to all of this, the approach being taken by the key stakeholders, is incredibly robust and has really gone through this kind of cultural regulatory shift or transformation in the last number of years. I would definitely highlight Riot in the world of League of Legends as being a bit of a flag bearer as to how to put in place governance and regulatory frameworks. And certainly, the way in which League of Legends is governed and regulated in the day-to-day work that we do in working with players and teams is no different or no less robust to what we see in many mainstream traditional sports. So hopefully that may also reassure any brands who are considering making a move into League of Legends, as one example. We quite often get asked about player welfare and player contracts. And obviously Anna talked brilliantly about the role of high-profile esports talent within her brand or her business. One of the things that I would absolutely emphasize is the way in which players and playing assets are viewed by top-tier professional teams is in some ways no different to a Premier League football club or a high-performance environment within traditional sport. So I'm talking about physical conditioning and the investment in that regard. I'm talking about mental wellness, and I'm talking about nutrition and fitness and high performance generally. I'm also talking about the big trend that we've seen, which is the access that these young players are getting to proper representation and legal advice, which has been a huge development in the maturity of the esports industry. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of a robust player contract between a young player and a global team. Not only does this provide security both to player and team, but it also safeguards that young player's rights and welfare. And it's also important from a team perspective, because what it does is it gives that team or that brand a form of stability, and it allows it to then build a brand and build a narrative and engagement around that brand as well, which is hugely important. So I suppose that the key message is, robust player contracts have become the norm. Were they the norm 4 or 5 years ago whenever we were working in the industry with players and teams and competitions? Perhaps not, but we have absolutely seen a real shift in the maturity of the industry in that sense. I'm conscious that time is probably going to run out. If we had more time, we would absolutely delve into discussion on diversity and inclusion, because it is a hugely hot topic within every aspect of the entertainment and sports sector. Perhaps in your own time, I would definitely encourage you to check out 3 really interesting case studies as examples of some of the fantastic work being done across the esports and gaming industry to make it more diverse, inclusive, welcoming, representative. The Newzoo study into diversity and inclusion is fascinating, as it actually dispels some of the myths around the perceived lack of diversity within esports. So I definitely would have a read of that. And I would check out Women in Esports, the initiative launched by the British Esports Association. And I would check out NET as well, the non-profit organization that has some fantastic programs running as well. Again, if we had more time, we'd probably delve into a more detailed discussion on that. That was a bit of a whistle-stop tour of the regulatory governance space. Looking forward to some questions, and feel free to drop me a line if you have any sort of follow-up thoughts on anything that we've covered today. Thanks, Judy.
Thank you, Johnny. It was really great to hear from you. Great to hear that reassurance that esports is now a much more mature, industry with sophisticated regulatory and legislative practices. I think that's reassurance that often brands need. There's quite a few misconceptions, I think, around the space based on its sort of newness, I guess, in comparison with a lot of other big established commercial sports industries. Okay, so that actually concludes our session. I want to say a big thank you to James and Romain, Anna and Johnny for sharing their expertise with us today. If anyone in the audience would like to hear more from any of our speakers or would like to discuss the opportunity for your brand in esports, then do get in touch and we can continue the conversation and help connect you to the right people. And for anyone that does want to stick around, we've got a very brief Q&A now, just answering a couple of the key questions that were asked of us in the chat. And so I am going to kick that off. If all of our lovely speakers could turn on their cameras, that would be great. And do all chip in on these questions, because I know you'll all have a slightly different perspective from your own space. So we had a question around barriers for alcohol brands, more sort of generally in the esports space. And clearly there will be barriers with certain games based on their rating, but there's many other parts of the ecosystem in which alcohol brands could absolutely play a role. So I'm going to hand that over to James, and maybe Romain, if you want to jump in at the end as well.
Yeah, thanks, Jodie. Obviously, we have a due diligence to perform and around the safety around our fan base, etc. So categories do tend to be restricted somewhat, but as a tournament operator, we work with multiple games and publishers, and we have to bear in mind that it's ultimately their commercial IP that we're operating under license, and therefore from game to game, the answer will be different based on these categories. Largely, certainly with the Valve titles that Johnny touched on, Counter-Strike and Dota, there is no restriction around alcohol, and obviously presenting it in the right way is extremely important. There's been several, certainly beer brands involved in the industry, and then certainly a few spirits that have made it. And at the end of the day, the gaming community, the esports community, are just humans and certainly like a drink. So there is huge opportunity to engage and done in the right way, for sure.
That was exactly the answer for a tournament organizer. From a publisher perspective, we have to be super cautious, especially in an ecosystem like the one developed by League of Legends, because whatever decision you make in one region could have potential impact on the other regions. And it's a bit easier to open such category when you have one country for one language. In Europe, as you all know, we speak more than one language. We have more than one legislation. So when you want to open such kind of category for the league, you have to make sure it's going to work in France and Spain and Poland and UK and the Nordics and so on. So it's a bit tricky. For now, the alcohol category is closed. We are running a few pilots with 0% alcohol in the local league, so not the LEC, but the level below, in Germany and Spain. And we are inquiring in a bit every country to understand exactly how could we fit. Because we do see the potential, and we understand this is something other esports titles have been opening already. So, but we have other topics like that which are a bit tricky for us outside of the obvious, like porn and weapons and stuff like that. Cryptocurrency is a really interesting one at the moment. Betting is absolutely forbidden for us as the kind of sponsors, but we are listening. We are always trying to protect our community in the best way possible. I can also quickly talk about what Johnny said with the work we do with Sports Radar, for example, really trying to understand how betting can have an impact on us, even if we try to protect our ecosystem from it, how it could have an impact on the players. And to piggyback even further on what Johnny was saying, we have a full internal department with like a lot of people called league management, and their only job is to make sure the league works well and is protected from any kind of external interaction. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would just jump in on what Roman said there. I think that's a really interesting point around the partnerships that we're now seeing between publisher and then betting integrity providers. The Riot Sport Radar partnership is a classic example of that. And that's something that has existed again within traditional sport for a number of years, but it's now becoming part and parcel of the leading games and publishers and tournament organizers within esports, which I think is another really exciting development.
Great, thank you everyone. That's good to get all of your perspectives. We have a question. I'm just going to edit it slightly, but it's broadly around the relationship, the sort of merchandise and licensing relationships when you have a traditional sports brand that also has an esports team, and are there examples where there are sort of licensing deals that are brokered for both those teams? Is there an impact on merchandise when the esport team does particularly well? Does that sort of impact the merchandise sales of kind of both teams as a whole? I'm just wondering whether James, you might be.
Yeah, Anna would have been perfect to answer this question.
Yeah.
There's a few examples of sports teams obviously taking on a traditional sports team taking on an esports team, and then but generally speaking, I think the target demographic is not only their own fan base as a sports team, but also a new fan base for the esports team. It needs to work in tandem. I think from our experience around all of our tournaments, and we have an online shop as well, and we sell a large number of a huge range of all the teams that operate within our tournaments and play in our tournaments, and the growth is spectacular. We're seeing, it's in the millions on an annual basis, and it will be a key driver for the sort of monetization of esports on an ongoing basis. And I think if you look at the ROI, it's kind of comparable with the traditional sports industry, but it goes beyond that. And we're doing a lot more work around product licensing as well as obviously merchandise. We've seen some great examples with some teams as well. More recently, the Gucci watch with Fnatic is a fantastic example, sold out in the first hour. Roman may touch on the Louis Vuitton bum bag, which was an incredible activation. I absolutely love that. And then from an ESL perspective, we had an ESL PC, so some more endemic type of products, but also anything from cables to furniture to anything that fits in the lives of as a passion. It works as long as there's a purpose or a reason behind it.
Absolutely. Oh, we've had a great question actually. Romain, you might want to tackle this one. Someone has posted that they are a part of a big brand, but they've got a very small team. Is it possible to show up in the esports arena as an authentic brand sponsor without having big resources or budgets?
That's a classic agency brief, I want to be big, I have no budget, and I need something cool. It's a challenge. I think in other area of the entertainment world, it's much more complicated because people know exactly what they're doing. Welcome to eSport, and I'm going to be really honest, we have no clue what we're doing. Our industry, our industry at big level is like 5 years old, I would say. Yes, of course, we've been here for a while. And from an ESL perspective, for example, they've been doing tournament for so long. But now the amount of people we have watching us, the amount of people we have interacting with us, the professionalization of teams, the professionalization of agencies and everything. This is we've never been that far. and today's conference is a good proof of it. Like we have around 100 people watching us, trying to understand our ecosystem and trying to get in. So I want to tell you, it's going to be much harder than if you had a lot of budget. But the beauty of it is if you can, and if you take the time to understand the ecosystem, you will see loopholes a bit everywhere, which will allow you to get an amazing return on investment just by understanding how gaming works, how the influencer works, how the team ecosystem is made, how the tournament organizer are operating, what publishers are allowing or not allowing. So of course, I don't have the answer because if not, I would be rich right now. I would do consulting for really big company with small department. But Riot can help you find one. ESL can help you find one. Rogue could help you find one. So it really depends on what you want. And yeah, keep diving deeper into esport. You're definitely going to find something because we are still at the early stages of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say an agency response to that would be absolutely.
Yeah, of course.
But no, seriously, there is definitely an argument, I think, in esports that building credibility from the kind of grassroots level upwards can be a really strong approach to kind of longevity and authenticity. And if you are going to start at grassroots level, then naturally you can come at it with a slightly lower budget. So I would say let us know how we can help, and we'll figure it out.
I would completely sort of echo that, Jodie, and just to link that back actually to the question that James answered about traditional sports teams, because I'm conscious there may be sort of a number kind of listening in. Merchandise obviously presents a huge opportunity, but I think the starting point is dialing it back to before that point, which is if you're a traditional sports brand or rights holder or team looking to enter esports, what is your objective? Is your objective to create an esports arm of your business and an esports team that will be branded like a Schalke or a PSG, for example? Or is your objective to explore other innovative, creative partnerships, which ties in with what Roman was saying, which is I suppose a softer, lighter entry rather than that fully blown, we're going to create an esports League of Legends team, for example. I mean, we get questions all the time, and I'm sure the other guys are the same, from traditional sports teams saying, what should we do with X, Y, and Z? I think the starting point has to be, how do you view esports? What is your objective and what are you trying to achieve? And I think that's a really sort of important one to balance up with the other issues.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Johnny. There's quite a few questions. I'm conscious of time for everyone, so I might just finish around. I wonder if I can kind of combine them. I don't think I can. We've got, I guess, a couple of questions. Maybe I can just spread them out that I'd love to hear from you guys on. One is about the sort of general wellness of the athletes and how much consideration is now put into the players' health and fitness, mental health, routines like exercise and sleep, because there are definitely some myths out there about players not being necessarily the kind of best looked after, and certainly not being as in such good health as athletes. So, but performance is very different to traditional sports. So it'd be good to get your thoughts on that.
Happy to take this one. I spent 4 years of my life as team manager and team director, and the performance aspect is crucial. Yes, the mainstream opinion on geek and professional gamers is usually it's 5 guys living in the basement and not seeing the light of the day at any point. The reality of it is, if you want to be able to step on a stage with 10 to 15,000 people watching you, with millions of people watching you, and you play one of those best of 5 I was talking about earlier, and where the first one to get 3 games win, and you are at the moment where you are 2 win versus 2 win, and one single game is going to make you a millionaire or not. And at this moment, it doesn't matter if you spend the last 20,000 hours in your room training. What matters is how good you sleep, how well you eat, how well you've been able to carry on from one game to another to learn. It's just, if you mindlessly play the game again and again, you're not going to learn anything. You need to play, stop, think about what you did, and capitalize on it. And that's why nowadays you have full management team created around those pro players to help them get a rhythm, get some discipline, understand how they can increase the performance from one game to another. And I mean, those fascinating ecosystem are really, really pushed in League of Legends because we have such a big world. But Counter-Strike was a bit more Far West, a bit more rough because they have less teams. So to stay the best, you need to be super, super performant. And some of those guys develop amazing routine to stay at the top. StarCraft 2 did an amazing work as well. Dota 2 did some crazy bootcamp everywhere around the world. So this is something we are, I think, really good at. We need to be able to communicate more towards it. And one of the brands we had in was Beko, for example. And we're trying to explain to them, look, first, being a geek is not taboo anymore because we are hundreds of millions right now. And being a super competitive geek needs a good health habit and a lot of disciplines nowadays. Sorry, yes. I got excited. The topic is I think, really important.
That was what was so beautiful about the Beko partnership. Eat Like a Pro was that actually it was exactly the right message for both the brand and the esports industry, and the wider communication around the health of players. And then finally, I think this is going to be our last question. It's interesting. So this is about brands that are not necessarily over 18 brands, but they're conscious of not communicating to those under a certain age. And so they kind of, this question is around how would you address that when so much of your audience is obviously engaging online? Like, are there ways in which you can make sure that for example, you're not targeting under 16s with your content and message?
I can touch on that. Obviously, so we've worked with a few brands who are targeting overage products. Maybe it's betting or alcohol. Obviously, the landscape and where we actually broadcast our content is in effect unregulated. So it is actually currently one of a moral responsibility that certainly we take as a brand, as many other brands will do. So therefore we rely on a level of technology in order to ensure we're targeting the right place. And some industries will actually insist on some level of regulatory approval. The betting industry, for example, I'm probably moving into Johnny's area here, but they have to prove that they're only reaching a certain audience or percentage. So I think it's about the channels we deliver the message and the campaign, but there's ways around it. Obviously, we're working in a digital sphere here, so you'd hope there's a way around it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously the game selection plays a big role in that as well. Also the breakdown of the audience. Great. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. I feel like we should probably draw a line there, but we did have lots more questions. So we will, for anyone who had a question that wasn't answered, we will try and come back to you with a specific answer to that question. And for those that have requested it as well, we've recorded the session and we can send the link to you if you are interested. So that just leaves me to say thank you again to our brilliant guest speakers, and we hope you enjoyed the session. Do get in touch with any further questions or if you want to continue these conversations. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.